He wrecked my shop before he apologized. That's how it started. Not with a knock, not with a hello. A black SUV parked crooked across two spaces outside my shop, and a man in a coat that cost more than my monthly rent came through my door like the bell above it owed him money. He knocked my display case with his shoulder. 3 pocket watches hit the floor. He didn't even look down. "I need this fixed by Friday," he said, and set a wooden box on my counter like he was doing me a favor. I didn't answer him right away. I picked up my watches first, checked the crystal on each one, checked the hands, checked the balance wheel on my grandmother's Elgin, the one I never sell, the one I keep behind the glass because it's not for sale and never will be. Only then did I look at him. "You're in a Daze Akonjo shop, not a drive-through." He blinked like nobody had spoken to him that way in years. Maybe nobody had. His name was Weston Calloway III, and I knew the name before he said it because everybody in this business knows it. Calloway Timepieces, 3 generations of American watchmaking money, a name stamped into the metal of half the auction catalogs I read for research. He didn't need to introduce himself. He needed a haircut and a lesson in manners, but he didn't need an introduction. He opened the box. Inside was a mantel clock, walnut case, the kind of piece that's maybe 140 years old if it's a day. The glass was cracked, the pendulum was gone, and there was a smell coming off it, that particular smell of a house closed up for a decade, dust and old varnish, and time itself gone stale. "My grandfather's," he said. "It needs to run again. I have a dinner Friday, investors. It needs to be on the mantel ticking like it never stopped." You want it to look like nothing happened to it. I want it fixed. Those aren't the same thing, and this isn't a costume shop. This is craftsmanship. It takes what it takes. He looked at me the way rich men look at prices they don't like the number itself was an insult. "Do you know who I am?" "I know who your family is," I said. "I don't know you, and right now I don't think you know this clock either." He left without another word, and I figured that was the end of it, some spoiled man's tantrum, a clock I'd never touch. But he came back the next morning, no entourage, no SUV blocking my spaces. He stood outside until I unlocked the door, and when I did, he said one word: "Please." I let him in because of that word, not because of who he was. I took the clock apart slow, the way I take everything apart, because rushing is how you lose the small pieces that can never be replaced, the pieces some factory in another century made by hand and never made again. I found the escapement corroded, the mainspring nearly rusted through, and beneath the movement, tucked into the back panel where nobody would think to look unless they knew to look, a folded photograph, brittle as a dead leaf, and a name written in pencil so faded I had to hold it to the light. The name was my grandmother's name. Not a name like mine, common enough to share with strangers. Her full name, the one she used at church and nowhere else, the one I'd only ever seen on one document in my whole life, her old work ledger, the one my mother kept in a shoebox, the one that listed her as a finisher for a watch company in Ohio in 1961, no last name given dignity, no credit given at all. I didn't say anything to him that day. I needed to be sure. That night, I called my mother. I asked her what she knew about her grandmother's work before she married my grandfather. My mother went quiet on the phone in the way she goes quiet when she's deciding whether a thing is safe to say out loud. "She built movements," my mother finally said, "by hand for a company. She was good, the best in that shop, they used to say, though they never said her name in the papers. She used to talk about one piece special, a regulator movement she designed different than the men were doing it, simpler, more accurate. She said a man took her drawings home one night to review them for management, and she never saw them again. 2 years later, that same company put out a new line. Everybody got a raise. She got nothing. She quit not long after. Never talked about it much. It made her too sad." I didn't sleep that night. When Weston came back the next day, I had the movement laid out on my bench, every gear separated, cleaned, cataloged. I showed him the regulator mechanism, the one inside his clock, and grandfather's clock. I asked him, careful, like I was diffusing something, whether he knew the history of his family's company, whether he knew where certain innovations came from. He didn't. Of course he didn't. Men like him inherit the ending of a story and never ask who wrote the beginning. I told him what I'd found, a mechanism design that matched, almost gear for gear, the kind of innovation my grandmother described, filed under a patent with only his great-grandfather's name on it. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just laid the pieces on the bench, physical evidence next to family memory, and let him look. He went pale. Then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't get defensive. He sat down on my one spare stool, put his head in his hands, and was quiet for a long, long time. "I've built my whole personality around being from a family of inventors," he said finally. "Do you understand what that does to a person? Finding out the invention wasn't even—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry, that's not the point. The point is what happened to her." "The point," I said, "is what happens now." He came back almost every day after that. Not about the clock, not really, though I kept working on it because a piece is a piece, and it deserves to be finished right, regardless of who brings it in. He came because, and I could see it in him even before he could admit it himself, being in my shop was the first place in his life nobody wanted anything from him except honesty. I didn't want his money. I didn't want his name. I wanted him to sit still long enough to actually see something. He offered to pay me triple. I told him no. He offered to fund a full workshop expansion, a storefront twice the size, my name on a plaque outside. I told him no again. He got frustrated with me the way people get frustrated when the thing they're used to solving every problem stops working. "Why won't you let me fix this?" he said one evening, standing in my doorway with the streetlight behind him. "Because you can't. You can't buy back 60 years. You can't buy her a name in a patent filing that's already yellow with age. Money isn't repair, Weston. It's just money. You want repair, you have to actually change something, not purchase your way out of feeling bad." He asked me what that would look like. I told him the truth. I told him it would look like his family's company acknowledging publicly, on the record, that the regulator design his empire was partly built on came from a black woman named Adiatse Nwosu, my grandmother, and that it would look like a fund, not charity, a fund in her name for young black urologists to train in a trade that's slowly dying and that hardly anyone gives black students the chance to learn. Not because it fixes the past. It doesn't. Nothing fixes the past. But because it's honest, and honest is more than his family had ever been. He did it. Not quietly either. A full statement, a real fund, my grandmother's name printed for the first time anywhere that mattered, 63 years after somebody took her drawings home and never brought them back. Somewhere in those weeks, something else happened, something quieter that I want to be honest about too. He started looking at me the way a man looks at a woman he begins to understand is more than useful to him. And for one evening, I let myself imagine what it would be to be looked at that way by a man who finally saw past the last name and the labor and the history, straight to me. But I want to be clear what I chose, because I think it matters more than any clock ever could. I didn't choose him. I chose myself. Because here's what I understood sitting across from a Callaway in my own shop, surrounded by the tools my hands had earned on their own, no inheritance behind me, nothing given. I didn't need him to see me to be real. I didn't need his money, his name, his sudden guilty tenderness. My grandmother built something extraordinary with nothing but skill and patience and a mind nobody bothered to credit, and she never once needed a Calloway's permission to be brilliant. Neither do I. So when the clock was finished, truly finished, pendulum swinging clean and even, case polished, glass replaced, I didn't deliver it to his mansion for his dinner with investors. I asked him to come to my shop instead, and I handed it to him across my own counter, the counter he'd once treated like a drive-through window, and I told him the last thing I had to say. This clock doesn't belong on your mantle as a trophy. It belongs wherever you tell the truth about where it came from. Every time, not just the once, in a press release, every time someone asks. He nodded. He understood finally the difference between guilt and change. He left that day, and though he still calls sometimes, and though there is something between us that I won't pretend isn't tender, I built something in those weeks that has nothing to do with him. I expanded my own shop with my own savings. I hung a photograph behind my counter, restored and framed, the one that fell out of his family's clock. My grandmother, 26 years old, hands full of gears, unsmiling, magnificent. I put her full name on a brass plate beneath it, the same name that once existed only in pencil, hidden, folded small enough to be forgotten. It isn't forgotten now. I didn't need a billionaire to search for me my whole life to know I was worth finding. I was always here. My hands always knew what they were doing. My name was always mine to claim, and now it sits engraved where anyone who walks through my door can read it. Not his family's legacy resting on my grandmother's shoulders, but mine, standing on my own, ticking forward, keeping time nobody gave me and nobody can ever take away. And every morning now when I open that shop and the bell rings over the door, I think of her, not as someone erased, but as someone who was only ever waiting for one of us to say her name out loud until it was finally heard.